Well, you've just taken the Unit 1 test and all 6 of its parts. How did you do? Well, if those tests are valid, taking all those different parts and putting them together should give us a good picture of how well you can enter into a relationship with a native speaker of the language that you're learning and communicate with that person. Of course, that's not necessarily the final word, the final say of that test. I remember in France, I'm relating this to you, that you might not grow discouraged in case your result on the test wasn't as good as you hoped it would be. Because again, the bottom line is not test scores, it's people. I remember when we lived in France, our church once invited a number of Americans to come over and help us establish contacts and communicate the gospel to people. And there was one gentleman from the inner city of Philadelphia. And he took a class with me at the beginning of the summer as these young people, college-age students and just after college, as they arrived to help us with our church's ministry. And in this class, as far as I could tell, he learned pretty much absolutely nothing. He tried, he was cooperative, but I wasn't able to get through to him. And yet I remember in the course of that summer, he was the most effective communicator of all the young people that came and helped us, that came from America. He would take his Bible, and he would come up to, open it up to a certain page, and he'd walk up to people on the street, and he had such an earnestness about him, such a seriousness about what he was trying to communicate. He would say, "This verse is for you." And people could tell he was so serious about what he wanted to say that they really tried to pull out their grade school English and figure out what it was that he was communicating. And maybe that's not the ideal. Later on in my time in France, I had the chance to speak in church, for example, and to give messages that would last 25, 30 minutes in French. And I could give some detailed explanation as to what I wanted to communicate because I had a relative mastery of the French language. And of course, that's what you want to aim for. But in case your test scores weren't what you hoped they would be, know that your personality and your seriousness and desire to communicate can make up for a multitude of weaknesses. So that's not an excuse to tell you that you don't really need to apply yourself to your studies and the lessons hereafter. I think we all want to communicate well, but nonetheless, don't give up. Well, for the rest of you who are very successful in communicating, bravo. Let me just say that we're about to go into one final lesson for Unit 1, and that's the Language Pals activity. Now, the Language Pals activity, I'm going to start it off with a video you'll watch in which I will try to simulate that kind of a communication with you as though I were your language pal. I'll start each time and I'll ask you a question. These questions, by the way, come right from part 4 of the test that you just took. You'll see pictures as I'm speaking to you that remind you of the topics about which we're speaking. And I'll ask you if you live in the city or in the country, in a house or an apartment, in the United States or in some other country. And I'll stop, give you time to respond, and you can respond to my question. And then I'll point to myself. And when I point to myself, what that means is now I want you to ask me the same question. And then I'll give you, after a reasonable time during which I hope you were able to form the question, I'll give you my response. And that way we can kind of practice your Language Pals activity before you actually perform it. So do you have a language pal? Do you have a person maybe in another country with whom you're communicating by over the internet in some fashion? Or maybe it's someone in your own town who's a native speaker of the language that you're learning and whom your teacher's inviting into class? I hope that's the case. But in any case, let's go ahead now and try to simulate Language Pals communication. Go to lesson 1.50 and watch the video that begins that lesson.